Chapter 20. She pushes back. The morning after the Red Hook raid didn't smell like victory. It smelled like antiseptic and expensive coffee. I sat on the edge of the velvet sofa in the penthouse, my neck wrapped in a silk scarf to hide the darkening bruises Caleb's fingers had left behind. Alexander was pacing the length of the living room, a phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, jagged rasp as he tore into someone, probably the head of the security firm that had allowed the warehouse to be jammed. "I don't care about the technical limitations," Alexander growled, his back to me. "I pay for invisibility and invincibility. You provided neither. Consider your contract terminated. My legal team will be in touch regarding the NDA breaches." He slammed the phone onto the obsidian desk and turned around. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw stubbled. He hadn't slept a second since we'd returned. He looked like a man who had seen the end of the world and was currently trying to negotiate a better deal with the apocalypse. "Alexander," I said softly, "you need to sit down. I need to ensure that every entrance to this building is upgraded with biometric override by noon," he countered, his gaze sweeping over me with a frantic intensity. "And I've moved your meetings. You aren't going to the lab today or tomorrow." I felt the first spark of resistance flare in my gut. "Excuse me." "The lab is too exposed," he said, walking toward me. He knelt between my legs, his hands resting on my knees. His grip was firm, almost desperate. "I'm having the engineering team send their data packets here. You'll review them from the penthouse. It's the only way I can guarantee your safety while Vane's legal team is still in play." I looked at him, really looked at him. This wasn't the man who had kissed me on the beach in Montauk. This was the man who had bought my father's company to save it. He was falling back into the only language he truly understood, ownership. "Alexander, look at what you're doing," I said, my voice steady. "You're not protecting me. You're grounding me. I'm a 30-year-old woman with a PhD and a senior advisor title. I am not a piece of delicate hardware you can just lock in a server room." After last night, after I saw him with his hands on your throat, his voice broke, a raw, jagged sound. "No, Maya, I am not losing you because of your pride. You stay here. That is the end of the discussion." He stood up, the wall of the CEO sliding back into place. He didn't wait for my response. He walked toward the elevator, buttoning his charcoal blazer. "I have the board. I'll be back by 6. Russo is outside the door. Do not try to leave." The doors slid shut, and I was left alone in the silence of the glass cage. I stood up, the silk scarf feeling like a noose. He thought he had ended the discussion. He didn't realize that in the Blackwood world, a no was just the beginning of a negotiation, and I was about to push back. Alexander POV. The board meeting was a bloodbath, but I wasn't the one bleeding. I sat at the head of the table, my presence a cold, suffocating weight in the room. I had already filed the injunctions against Vane. I had already leaked the footage of the illegal warehouse operation to the DA's office. I was winning on every front, but my mind was 40 floors up. I kept seeing the bruises on Maya's neck. I kept feeling the way her body had slumped against mine when I pulled her away from Thorne. Every time a board member spoke, their voice was drowned out by the roar of my own failure. I had let her get hurt. I had allowed the boundary to be breached. "Mr. Blackwood." Henderson's voice, now small and tentative since his near ouster, broke through my thoughts. "Regarding the final phase of the mapping rollout, we need Miss Sterling's sign-off on the ethical protocols." "Is she available?" "Miss Sterling is working remotely for the foreseeable future," I said, my voice like iron. Send the documents to my private server. I will review them with her. Remotely, a female board member frowned. Sir, the launch is in 10 days. We need her in the lab for the final calibration. The engineers are saying. The engineers will say what I tell them to say, I snapped, leaning forward. Miss Sterling's safety is a priority of this firm. Until the Thorn threat is fully neutralized, she stays under my direct supervision. The room went silent. I could see the looks they were exchanging. The optics Aliner had warned me about. They saw a man who was no longer thinking with his head but with his instincts. They saw a weakness. I didn't care. Let them think I was losing my mind. As long as she was behind the reinforced glass of the penthouse, I could breathe. The meeting adjourned, and I headed back to my office. I needed to check the security feeds. I needed to see her face. I reached for my tablet, but Marcus intercepted me in the hallway. Sir, there's an issue. What issue? Is the vein injunction stalled? No, sir, it's Miss Sterling. Marcus looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. She's in the lab. I froze. The air in the hallway seemed to vanish. What? She convinced Russo that you had authorized a physical site visit for the calibration. She's currently on the 91st floor with the lead engineers. My vision blurred with a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline. She had defied me. She had walked right out of the sanctuary I had built for her and into the most public space in the building. Get security on the 91st floor, I growled, my voice vibrating with rage. Now. Maya POV. The lab was humming with the sound of progress. The recursive loop is holding, Miss Sterling, the lead engineer, David, said, pointing to the shimmering holographic display. But we need your authorization to bridge the secondary neural pathways. If we don't do it now, the launch will be delayed by 48 hours. Bridget, I said, my voice clear and authoritative. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. This was where I belonged. Not on a velvet sofa, but here, in the heart of the machine, making the decisions that would change the world. Russo was standing 10 feet away, looking nervous, but I ignored him. I was pushing back. I was showing Alexander and the world that I wasn't a victim to be guarded. I was the architect. The lab doors hissed open. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The engineers went silent, their eyes widening as Alexander Blackwood stormed into the room. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a storm front. He walked straight to the console, ignoring the staff, and stood inches from me. His presence was so intense it was like a physical blow. Out, he said, his voice a low, terrifying whisper. Alexander, we're in the middle of a calibration. Everyone out now. The engineers didn't wait for a second invitation. They scrambled for the exit, Russo following them with a guilty look. The doors shut, leaving us alone in the blue-lit silence of the lab. You lied to my security detail, Alexander said, his voice trembling with the effort of control. I didn't lie. I reinterpreted your instructions for the sake of the project. I stood my ground, my chin tilted up. You can't do this, Alexander. You can't run this company by decree, and you certainly can't run my life. I am trying to save your life. He shouted, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. Caleb is still out there. Vane is looking for any opening, and you walk into this building like it's a playground. It's my lab, my work, my father's legacy. I shouted back, stepping into his space. I poked a finger into his chest, right over his racing heart. You're not afraid for me, Alexander. You're afraid of the fact that you can't control me. You're afraid that if I'm out here, I might realize that I don't need your protection. Alexander grabbed my hand, his grip tight but not painful. He pulled me flush against him, his eyes dark with a mixture of rage and agonizing fear. "You think this is about control. I saw you dying, Maya. I saw the life leaving your eyes while I was stuck behind a wall of static. If I have to be the villain in your story to keep you breathing, then so be it. But you are going back to that penthouse." "No," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not. I'm going to stay here and finish this, and then I'm going to have a meeting with the press. Alone. Over my dead body. Then get ready to die, Alexander. Because the girl who was financially cornered is gone. The girl who was locked in is gone. I'm a partner. And if you can't treat me like one, then the contract is the only thing we have left." The silence that followed was a battlefield. We stood there, locked together, our breathing erratic. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the titan fighting the man, the possessor fighting the lover. "You're pushing me, Maya," he rasped, his hands sliding up to cup my face. "You're pushing me to a place where I don't know how to be the man you want." "Then be the man I need," I countered. "Trust me, not just with the code, trust me with my own life." Alexander POV. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to kiss her until she forgot her own name. I wanted to pick her up and carry her out of this room and never let her see the sky again. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw the truth. If I forced her back to the penthouse, I would win the battle and lose the war. I would have her body, but her spirit, the fire that had made me feel alive for the first time in a decade, would go out. I would be left with a beautiful ghost. My grip on her face softened. I closed my eyes, resting my forehead against hers. My heart was thudding so hard it felt like it might burst. "You're going to be the death of me," I whispered. "I'm going to be the life of you," she replied, her fingers tangling in my hair. "But only if you let me." I pulled back, looking at her. She looked magnificent in her defiance. The silk scarf had slipped, revealing the bruises on her neck, a brutal reminder of the stakes. But she wasn't hiding them. She was wearing them like a badge of survival. "Fine," I said, the word feeling like a surrender of my soul. "You stay, you finish the calibration. But Russo stays inside the room, not at the door. Inside." "A deal." "And the press meeting." "I'll do it in the executive lobby, tomorrow morning. You can be there, but you don't speak for me." I let out a long, ragged breath. I was a man who moved mountains, and I had just been dismantled by a 5'7" woman with a stubborn streak a mile wide. "I hate this," I muttered, pulling her back into my arms. "I know." She kissed my jaw, her voice softening. "But you love me." "And that's the complication you're just going to have to live with." I held her for a long time in the blue light of the lab. I still felt the urge to lock the doors. I still felt the urge to call in a private army. But as I felt her heart beating against mine, I realized that she was right. The boundaries were being tested, and for the first time in my life, I was the one who had to move. Maya POV. The press meeting the next morning was a Shark Tank. The executive lobby was packed with reporters, cameras, and the heavy scent of anticipation. Alexander stood 5 feet behind me, his arms crossed, his face a mask of stone. He didn't say a word, but his presence was a constant, protective hum in the air. I stood at the podium, wearing a suit of crisp white, the color of a new beginning. I had removed the scarf. I wanted them to see the bruises. I wanted them to see the reality of the Blackwood-Sterling partnership. "Miss Sterling, is it true that Caleb Thorne was your former fiancé? Is the Horizon Project a front for personal vendettas? How do you respond to the locked-in allegations?" I waited for the noise to die down. I felt Alexander shift behind me, his protective instinct flaring, but I held up a hand to still him. "My name is Maya Sterling," I said, my voice ringing through the lobby with a clarity that surprised even me. And yes, Caleb Thorne was someone I once knew. He is also a man who attempted to steal a legacy that does not belong to him. As for my arrangement with Mr. Blackwood, I paused, looking directly into the main camera. I am not a victim, I am not an asset, and I am certainly not locked in. I am the senior advisor of this company because I am the only person who can deliver the future we have promised. Alexander Blackwood didn't buy me, he invested in me. And if the world has a problem with a woman owning her power, then the world is about to have a very difficult decade. The room exploded with questions, but I was done. I turned and walked toward Alexander. He didn't say a word. He just reached out and took my hand, his grip firm and public. He led me through the crowd, his head held high, his gaze lethal to anyone who tried to block our path. We reached the private elevator and the doors closed, sealing out the noise. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with a mixture of pride and something that looked suspiciously like awe. "I was me," I said, leaning back against the wood paneling. "The version of me that doesn't need a cage." Alexander stepped into my space, his hands finding the wall on either side of my head. He didn't kiss me, he just looked at me, a slow, dark smile spreading across his face. "You pushed back," he noted. "I did. And you won." He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "But don't think for a second that this means the rules are gone, Maya. It just means I have to find a new way to keep you." "Is that a threat, Mr. Blackwood?" "It's a promise," he whispered, his mouth finally finding mine. Alexander POV. The fire of Act II was no longer a destructive force. It was a beacon. As the elevator climbed toward the penthouse, I realized that Maya had done more than just defend her autonomy. She had saved us from the trap of our own dynamic. We weren't a CEO and a ward anymore. We were two forces of nature, bound together by choice. But as the doors opened into the penthouse, I saw a single, red light blinking on my private console. A breach. Not in the lab, not in the tower. In the medical facility where Maya's father was being held, I felt the blood drain from my face. Vane hadn't gone for the code, he hadn't gone for Maya, he had gone for the only thing she had left to lose. "Alexander, what is it?" Maya asked, sensing the shift in me. I looked at her, the pride of the moment vanishing, replaced by a cold, hollow dread. "The hospital," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The perimeter has been compromised." The pushback was over. The fallout was beginning. And as Maya's face went pale, I realized that the boundaries we had just tested were about to be shattered completely. Maya POV. The world went silent. The hospital, my father. I looked at Alexander, and for the first time, I didn't see a billionaire or a protector. I saw a man who was just as terrified as I was. "We have to go," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Maya, it might be a trap." "I don't care," I shouted, the fire of defiance turning into a roar of desperation. "He's my father, Alexander. If Vane touches him..." "I'll kill him," Alexander said, his voice turning into a lethal, mechanical thing. "I'll burn his world to the ground, but we go together. And this time, we don't follow the rules, we make our own." We turned back to the elevator, the victory of the press meeting forgotten. Act II was fire. But as the doors closed, I realized that the fire was no longer something we controlled. It was consuming us, and the only way to survive was to walk right into the heart of the flame. Next chapter. Chapter 21, His Jealousy Shows.